Hello everyone! I don't know how many things I bought because of social media ads, but here is one of my latest findings. This is the Kattvalk Gansai Tambi granulating colors. I love the regular Gansai Tambi paint, so I'm super curious about these. Only looking at the box itself, these paints seem very interesting, and it turns out that this is set 1 out of 2, so of course I had to get this one also. For the first set, the colors looks very similar in the pans, and in the second one we can see some more varieties in the colors, but I am pretty sure that these colors will look different once you add some water to them. And also, as you might have noticed, both of the sets comes with an empty pan, and this is so that you can mix the paints and bring out the different effects. And if it seems a little confusing right now, don't worry, we will figure it out. So what is granulating watercolors? Basically, it is paints where the pigment particles clumps together on the paper, creating a textured or grainy effect. So these types of paints can be used to add visual interest and depth to a painting. I haven't used a lot of granulating watercolors, and I might also mention that I am no watercolor expert, I'm just doing this for fun. These Gansai Tambi paints seem to have multiple colors in one to create sort of like a dreamy and whimsical effect, so I'm super intrigued. So yeah, let's do some swatching. I'm gonna do some proper swatching too, but I'm just so curious to see what these look like, so I'm gonna do a little pre-testing. Already when adding some water to the paints, I can see a little bit of blue in there, and I'm pretty sure that you're supposed to mix these with a lot of water, but now I'm just adding water to the paint pan, and I want to see what that looks like. So this specific color is called Aurora Red. It is like a reddish purpley color with a teal undertone. It looks very trippy. You know the red and blue 3D glasses? It almost reminds me of that. I'm gonna try to figure out how I want to swatch these, because I want to see all the different effects that I can get. So the swatch process was super interesting, at least to me. I mixed each paint with a lot of water as recommended in this little cup. And once the paint had set for a moment, when tilting the paint cup, you could see the different colors in the paint. The pigments had separated. Some of the pigments sank to the bottom, while some of them stayed near the surface. And for each of the colors, I did 5 different swatches. The first one, it is just the undiluted paint straight from the paint pan. The second one, I added the concentrated paint to water on the paper, and I just let it spread and do its thing. For the third one, I picked up the paint pigments from the bottom of the paint cup by tilting it, and for the fourth one, I picked up the pigments from the surface of the paint cup. The fifth swatch is the watered down paint all mixed together. So I got so many different colors and effects from the same paint pan, and it is so much fun seeing how the paint changes when just sitting on the paper. The paint swatches sort of looks like pieces of art themselves, and I deliberately left out writing down the color names on the swatches because I thought maybe I could use them and cut them out and create sort of like an art collage. Also, as you might have noticed, I did the swatches on both textured and smooth watercolor paper because apparently different textures could bring out different effects in the paint. Personally, I think the more textured paper looks very interesting, so that is what I'm gonna use for the final paintings. So let's make some art. Though sometimes it isn't that easy to just make some art. What do I draw? How do I find the motivation and inspiration? This is something that all artists struggles with once in a while to get the creative flow going. So let me tell you about this class that I took on Skillshare, which happens to be today's sponsor. This class is called 10-Minute Art Journaling, a 7-day challenge to conquer artist block by Ashton Womack. And what I absolutely loved about this class is keeping it simple, which is exactly what I need. Have your sketchbook and your art supplies prepared, set 10 minutes on your timer, and then just draw. Messy, quick, and mindless. The time limit makes it so you can't overthink, which I often do, and what you draw really isn't that important. What matters is that you draw something to get the creative energy going. This really resonated with me because sometimes I just want to draw or doodle, I want to get something out of me, but I tend to overcomplicate things and then I get blocked because I have these weird expectations to make a perfect sketchbook spread, and then I end up not drawing at all. So this was such a fun and actually very important exercise for me to be able to be creative in such an unconditional way. The teacher of this class, Ashton, was super great and interesting to listen to. All Skillshare's classes are taught by talented and creative professionals, and you can pick from thousands of classes in categories like art and illustration, design, photography, and so much more. It is the perfect way to connect with fellow artists while learning stuff at the same time. If you would like to join Skillshare, they have a 7-day free trial and 30-day money-back guarantee. The first 500 people to use my link in the description or scan the QR code will receive 20% off their first year of Skillshare. Get started today. Thank you so much to Skillshare for sponsoring this video. Now, when the creative juices are flowing, let's make some art. So first off, as a little doodle warm-up session, I just want to play around with the paints and get to know them, making some shapes and patterns. I tried keeping the same mindset as when doing the sketchbook doodles earlier, to just make something and not think too much about it, which was a lot of fun and super relaxing. When doing the swatches, I think the most interesting effect came from when adding the concentrated paint directly to water on the paper and let the pigment spread out and separate and create all the different color shiftings and patterns and textures. So that is what I did here, just letting the paint flow out. And the texture of the actual paper also adds an extra dimension. The pigments kind of pulls up in the grooves or the dents, and the patterns and the colors keep changing all the way until the paint dries. And in one way it makes these paints a little unpredictable, a little hard to control, but that is also why they are so much fun to work with. And my guess is that if you choose to use these kinds of granulated paints, it is because you want the grainy and the textured look, or else you could just use regular watercolors. But yeah, I found it super interesting and fun to just let the paint do its thing. There is almost like an anticipation. What will the final result look like once the paint has dried? So when I was swatching the paints, I noticed that there are a few colors in these sets that are a little, well, maybe not my favorite colors. There is this one that is called Aurora Orange, that is a mix of green and orange pigments, and when you mix them together they create this muddy color because, you know, orange and green makes mud. And the same thing with a color called Cosmic Olive, which is green and purple. It also makes a little bit of a muddy color, and I do like that there are a few options for earthier tones, but I do definitely prefer the brighter and maybe not so clashing colors a lot better. So once the paint has dried, I added a few details using a white paint pen just to add something a little something. This art is so simple, but I loved working on it. It was so much fun and relaxing, and I think the final result is very interesting. It kind of reminds me a little of soap bubbles. So for this next piece, I wanted to try the granulating paints for an actual illustration, and I was imagining this field of plants and flowers under a very dramatic, magical fantasy night sky, and a kitty, of course, and I decided which colors I wanted to use for this painting, and then I prepared them by adding them with a lot of water to my paint palette and the mixing cup, and I could tilt the palette to pick up the different pigments, just as I did when doing the swatching. What I really like about these paints is that you don't have to do a lot of work to achieve interesting effects and textures. I think I've said textures about 100 times in this video already. Yeah, one layer is enough to make things happen. Then, if you should use them for a full illustration like this, I am not so sure of. There is certainly a lot of things going on, and I'm not sure if it adds something or if it makes it too busy. For me personally, I think these paints would be great for smaller and less detailed illustrations. I would love to use these paints in a regular watercolor painting, like for certain elements. They could be used for a dramatic night sky, like in this painting, or whimsical mushrooms or magical crystals, just to add something a little extra. For a whole illustration, it might be a little too much. I don't know, what do you guys think? Since I added the paints with a lot of water to the paper, the paints took a little longer to dry, and I didn't want the colors to bleed into each other, so I left some space between the different color areas. And normally I wouldn't leave a lot of white space like this. I would do a wash over the green areas, for example, in one go, and then do multiple layers on top of that to bring out the different shapes and details. And I could probably have tried that here too and see how the colors would react with each other, but also I wanted the different colors isolated and not mixing and bleeding into each other. I want to bring out the different effects for each color, but it gives it almost like a mosaic look, which I think adds to the whimsical feeling that I was going for anyway. I also really like how you can either just use the paint straight from the paint pan and dip it in water, and you will get this granulated effect with all the different color shiftings and textures, or you can just pick out a specific pigment and get a pure pink or teal, etc. For the pink flowers around the sides of the painting, I picked out the pigment from the bottom of the paint palettes, and I also did that for some of the green plants. Unfortunately, some of the granulating effects get lost when picking out specific pigments, but it is nice that you still have a little bit of control over the colors. It makes the paints more versatile. Once the watercolors had dried, I filled in the kitty using a black pen. I thought it would be nice to have a solid dark area in the middle of this colorful chaos, just to have something for the eyes to rest on. I was debating if I should also use the black pen and fill in all the white gaps, meaning I would have to color around every single little paint blob. So I did actually print out a copy of the painting and I tried out my idea on that, and I thought it ended up a little too dark, so I decided to scrap that idea. But I still felt like this piece needed some more contrast, something to sort of separate the foreground from the sky. So I went with colored brush pens, giving it just enough line work to add some more contrast, but still keeping it soft and loose. At the end, I tried adding some details and stars with paint pens, but somehow what I added just disappeared into all the textures, so it doesn't show up as much as I would want to, but I can always add it digitally afterwards if I like. Anyway, here is the finished piece. I had so much fun working with these paints, playing around with the texture and colors, and even the paint swatches looks gorgeous, like little gemstones. Let me know which one of the pieces that you like the most, and it is okay to say the swatches. Thank you so much to Skillshare for sponsoring this video, and thank you guys for watching. I really hope you enjoyed this video. I will see you next time. Keep drawing my happy cats. Bye!